Well, good morning. This is a message to the Lost Boys. So yesterday, this is a follow-up to the Sam Hyde video. I'm going to jump to the punchline, and then I'm going to fill out what the background for the ideas are. And the punchline of this whole thing is that creative practice, artistic practice, the act of creation is something that allows us, that fills the individual with both potentially with power and with meaning, and that further, that artistic practice, the creative practice, can be a kind of form. It can actually be a kind of transcendental form of self-development and a kind of spiritual endeavor in the way. Yesterday, I published a video telling my story. I was asked by Comedy Treehouse a couple of days ago to publish my story on Sam Hyde. I've been asked a number of times. Episode 125, Part 1, Sam Hyde applies to art school. And I just kind of relayed my interpretation of Sam's work and talked about when he applied to the 2D department here at Cranbrook Academy of Art. And I thought, given that had like 26,000 views in 24 hours and there were a number of 500 comments or something, I thought I would follow up really quickly with a message to the Lost Boys. The Lost Boys, as you know, is a film from the 1990s starring Kiefer Sutherland and the two Coreys.
How far are you willing to go, Michael? Guess first.
Kind of a great film. Boys, girls. The point really is that when looking at the analytics for that video, I think Sam's audience skews decidedly people who identify as male, and so therefore this specific video is addressed to the Lost Boys. I think this advice applies to more than just young men. There was a recurrent theme in the comments about how Sam attempts to help people, and I don't doubt that. I raised the issue in terms of interpreting his work, about whether or not he and his work are ideological and political in nature, whether he is a true believer and a kind of fundamentalist ideologue, or whether or not he is a kind of postmodern nihilist, that his comedy is the absolute apotheosis, the kind of high point in a reflection of a postmodern nihilist culture. Now, I don't have an answer to that question. That given that I think that a lot of the work trucks in a kind of postmodern nihilism, I thought what I would do is give my unsolicited opinion. Advice might not be the right word, but my unsolicited opinion. Sam apparently shouted out my station, my fledgling and tiny YouTube station, a number of times, pointing his viewers for an insight into how an artist or designer studio might function, and with some positive feedback. So with that as background as to why I would be so bold and so arrogant as to attempt a message to what I'm referring to as the Lost Boys. So basically, the fundamental premise of my advice is that it's my belief that Western individualism, that the supremacy of Western individualism, along with a toxic stew, a witch's brew, postmodern ideology and philosophy, as well as the effects of technology. I'm going to offer what I believe are some alternatives to a lifestyle that is steeped in, or a life that's steeped in those issues. So one of the fundamental issues with the supremacy of the individual is that what it does is it abdicates. It basically states that the rights of the individual, that the person themselves are supreme, and that what we're to do, what we're to do is we're to think only of ourselves. That the way in which we have meaningful relationships with others is through actual responsibility. And the point that I'm getting at is that the responsibility to family and community. But there is this further idea that I became kind of aware of through my friend Joshua Ray Stevens, which is this notion of the idiot, right? So the idiot is that individual who is locked inside of their own idiocosm. The self-cosm world. So there is this idea of the self, that all of one's desires take supremacy. One's viewpoint can't be challenged. But so I think that really what has happened over the course of the last 100 years in Western culture is that this idea, this kind of teaching, this celebration of individuality, at the expense of family and community and responsibility, specifically responsibility, has disempowered and denuded people, has had the opposite effect. So if an individual wants agency and wants power, it comes through responsibility to others. It comes through responsibility to those people that we love, and it comes through responsibility to community. Now, you can define that however you'd like. That community could be a very small group of people. It could be a collection of people on the internet. It could be your country or your small your city. But basically this notion that we have a responsibility to others and that the primacy of our id and our ego is not the thing that drives us. The punchline of this whole thing is that creative practice, artistic practice, the act of creation is something that allows us, that fills the individual with both potentially with power and with meaning, and that further that artistic practice, the creative practice, can be a kind of form. It can actually be a kind of transcendental form of self-development and a kind of spiritual endeavor, in the way that sacred geometry, as an example, is a kind of process by which the geometrician, the person, utilizes geometric relationships in order to come to a deeper understanding of those things, of the transcendental, deep mystery of our existence. So largely, what I'm advocating is that if you are a postmodern nihilist, that it is through responsibility, it's through denying the supremacy of individualism first, and acknowledging and embracing the responsibility, that our individual responsibility towards others, that we find meaning. The second thing is that artistic practice or creative practice, it can be part of this process of magis. Magis is the Latin term for the full development, the full development of potential, the ceaseless striving for excellence. A man named Sri Chinmoy, who spoke of the notion, among many other things, of that the mind, the body, and the spirit all come up at once. And so an integral element of Chinmoy's teachings is the understanding of self-transcendence. This notion that it's the practice of attempting to continually develop and to go beyond our own limitations, our own previous capacities. And so basically the point here is that artistic practice can be a spiritual endeavor, like a sacred geometrician. And the artist's studio itself, regardless of whether it looks like mine or whether or not you have a simple desk, that can be seen as a tool. I'm going to link to a video here called Holy Diver. I'm not talking about the artist as a type of orthodox, normal, religious practitioner. Let's take a moment to consider the words of Ronnie James Dio and consider the artist a type of holy diver. Holy diver! That I made one of my episodes, and I would encourage you to watch it. And basically it is this notion, it fleshes out the notion through looking at Nikos Kazantzakis' The Last Temptation of Christ, among other things, of the artist and the studio as a sacred space whereby what the artist is doing is the artist is, in fact, attempting to come to a deeper understanding of the profound mysteries of our existence. But all of this is predicated upon this idea of the toxic witch's brew of postmodern ideology that leads to nihilism. You know, there are many definitions of postmodernism. Dick Hebdige, the cultural critic and theorist, wrote about the three negations of postmodernism, which is one of the many possible definitions, which I think lie at the core of many of the problems that we're experiencing in our culture today. The three negations that he referred to are that postmodernism at their core are anti-teleological. It's against telos. It's against the notion that that things in themselves have an essence. They have a predetermined final position that is evident and apparent in the object. In other words, acorns become oak trees. They don't in fact become squid or flowers. Hebdige goes on to talk about the idea that postmodernism is against utopianism. It's against utopias. It's against the idea that human progress can effloresce, can flower into a kind of perfect perfection, can flower into communities that are perfect in their articulation or near and perfect in their articulation. Hebdige goes on to talk about the idea that postmodernism is inherently against totalization. This notion that human intellectual systems like the Enlightenment Project and reason can provide a kind of accurate and totalizing picture of human knowledge. And so effectively what has happened over the course of the past 50 years is that postmodern ideology has so suffused our culture that there has been a wholesale assault on even notions of truth. We hear this over and over again. We hear people talking about my truth. Now, my truth does exist. It's a category of truth. But as an example, we no longer hear people talking about the truth. And so really what this does is this leads this kind of toxic brew of individualism, of hyper-individualism, postmodern ideology, and then technology inexorably leads to a kind of nihilist condition. I'm also going to link to Robert Barron's Ideas Have Consequences here.
Just as in Nietzsche, this death of God opens up this space into which the will to power can assert itself. So now in Sartre, it opens up the space for existence, for my self-assertive freedom to say, here's who I am. Here's what I'm about. Again, I'll come back to this in a little bit, but I hope you can see all kinds of overtones for the way an awful lot of people think today.
It's an amazing video on the notion that ideas like postmodern philosophy have populate out across culture and across time and have ramifications. But technology. So a really important idea is this notion of gamer culture, and you feel free to flame me. But as an example, social media, Twitter, but importantly, gamer culture is another component of the picture that is absolutely destroying one's capacity to have any agency at all. What do I mean by this? I mean the fact that gaming ultimately places a person into a kind of avatar. So what it does is it decenters the human. It literally takes the person out of the material body and places them into a nearly meaningless avatar. And so it's not necessarily that technology itself is inherently bad. But basically what I'm saying is that, if I mash and this is what I'm encouraging you to do, if I mash these buttons in the proper way, right? Power and money spit out of my phone. So through creative practice, through the actual getting off your couch and making work, and through the development of the self, and by eschewing, by turning one's back on the insignificance of avatar-based virtual gaming systems, and working creatively on products on things that manifest themselves in the real world. What you're doing is you're investing yourself with meaning and culture, meaning and power. So this is my message to the Lost Boys. My message is effectively to turn away from the supremacy of this idea of individualism and to understand that freedom itself comes through responsibility to others. It comes from a deep responsibility to those people that we love and our communities. The second thing is to use creative practice, to use artistic practice as a tool to deepen our understanding of the divine mystery of our own existence, to turn away from the tenets of postmodernism, to turn away from the anti-teleological impulse, the anti-utopian impulse, and the anti-totalization impulse, and to realize that nihilism, that the idea that all life is inherently meaningless, is the veil of Maya, and further that to strive for magis, to strive for the ceaseless, relentless, and never-ending self-transcendence, the pursuit of excellence, and to utilize art and design, creative practice, writing, creativity itself as the primary tool to invest yourself with real meaning and power.